to invite up Coline and Harrison from the British Museum, who are going to talk to us about a very interesting project, learning from TripAdvisor reviews. Over to you two.
Hi everyone, thanks for having us. So a quick introduction to this project. We're going to talk about a TripAdvisor research project that was born out of some research, kind of a little focus that we were doing at the museum. So we're going to talk about this project, but also how we got here and where it started from. So Harrison and I work together really well. Harrison does data science things at the museum, so he initially was in the big data team and now moved over to membership, and I'm the Visitor Insights manager at the museum. So Visitor Insights at the British Museum means that we try to listen to everything that visitors say to and about the museum, so both online and offline, and then we try to learn from these conversations. So that's the size of these conversations. So that is a lot of data and a lot of messages every month. So the dark blue circle at the bottom is what we call direct messages. So it's emails, it's comment cards, it's letters, and it's things that we as a publicly funded institution have to respond to. Basically, it is customer service. The two other circles, so we have really big numbers, but everyone in the room has them. Everyone in the room has their two own circles of TripAdvisor, of Facebook or Google reviews, and everyone has tweets that people are putting out about them. So you might not like it, you might not want to read those conversations, but they are going to happen with or without you. So you have to make the decision to know, do I want to engage with those? And do I want to learn and get insights from these conversations? So we decided that we did want to get insight, but it's, how do you do that? How do you actually get all these numbers and crunch them down into reports? And how do you actually make that understandable for other teams around the museum? So what we thought initially was, if you want to count and if you want to measure, you have to have a unit. So I started there on this very sexy Excel spreadsheet. So the person who replied to all the emails and comment cards and letters logged them in an Excel document that we created. So the point of this Excel document is to understand what arrives. Is it a feedback or is it an inquiry? Is it positive or is it negative? Is it about the toilets or is it about the tours or is it about your bag checks? And so with that, at the end of every month, we started seeing trends. So we saw, oh, okay, we have an increase in complaints about the toilets. What can we do about that? We have more and more questions about the tours. Maybe we could put more proactive information on our website. And we have some really positive feedback about our families team. This is great, let's share that feedback with them. The problem with that kind of data is, if people contact you, they often do so because they want to complain. It's a bit sad, but that's the truth. So we decided we needed to expand our data set and look a bit further afield. So we thought, okay, we know that on social media there's conversations happening around us, and we know that these are usually positive. So we went out to include Twitter in what we were monitoring. So using Hootsuite, we kind of segmented conversations, and we managed to pick up conversations that were quite clear and quite easy to use around tickets, around bookings, around question marks, around the facilities. So then I added that into the Excel document I was using every month. So not only did I expand the range of conversations that we were monitoring, but I was also able to report on much more positive conversations, because what people say on social media is quite often much more positive than what you'll receive by email. Now here comes the plot twist. If you can tag and measure emails and comment cards and letters and tweets, why can you not do that on TripAdvisor? So the idea might sound a bit crazy, but TripAdvisor is actually a researcher's dream, because you've got amazingly clean data. Someone has stored it there for you. You've got years and years of reviews. So for the British Museum, in 2 years, we had about 30,000 reviews. If you look at that further, that stretches to over 50,000 reviews. And in these reviews, people don't only say, I came to the museum and I liked it. They say, I came to the museum with my 6-year-old daughter. We traveled from Surrey. We queued a lot at the entrance. So it was a bit annoying. And then we went to the cloakroom and we queued for that long. And then we tried this activity, but I'm not sure we liked it. And we went to the cafe and it was a bit expensive. So it's really interesting. And the best thing is, these people then rate their review. So not only were we able to figure out what people were talking about, but we could also understand what mattered to them the most. So initially we started looking at these reviews in like kind of a very small samples and manually tagging them. So it was small data sets, but that wielded interesting results. So that's one of the first things that we were able to see. We're able to see, according by topic, how do people rate their reviews? And we could see that, yes, people like the Rosetta Stone, yes, labels are important, but what really matters is there queue in your toilets? How bad do your toilets smell? How hot is it in your rooms? So we were able to show the rest of the museum that these had very strong and profound impacts on visitor satisfaction. So I'm not going to say that we solved these problems overnight, but what we have done is we have given these numbers to the relevant teams around the museum, and we're kind of giving them munitions to fight their battles. We're trying to be the visitors' voices here. The next interesting thing that we could see and that we'd never been able to see before is that people who speak different languages speak about different things. So I'm French, so what I love to see is that French people complain about overcrowding, I expected that one, and talk about families a lot. But what's interesting is we don't really have anything about families in French at the museum. We do have French family audio guides, but that's about it. And you'll also notice that Spanish people will talk about tours and talks a lot, even more than English people, but we don't actually have tours in Spanish at the museum. So this was making a business case that we actually might need to tailor our offer, and this was something that we were able to share with the groups teams and the tickets team and show them there are people in the museum who would be willing to pay some money to go on a Spanish tour, or who would be willing to pay money to have French activities. Other interesting finding, people who speak different languages visit in different group types. So we were able to see that because that's the kind of data TripAdvisor gives us. So I was saying that French people talk about families a lot. That's because they visit with families a lot. And whereas Japanese people are more likely to travel on their own. So that also makes a really good case for having a wider range of visiting experiences at the museum. Currently, we kind of tailor to one kind of visit. Like you arrive, everyone gets the same map, everyone gets the same, more or less the same visiting experience, but that could show that this is something that needs to evolve. So as I said, this is something that we did on a very limited pool of review. It took a lot of time tagging things. And then with Harrison on the project, he knows a lot more than I do. He's a lot smarter than I am, so we were able to go on some more interesting adventures.
Yeah, so that's me running away with Colleen's data. I heard about these reports that Colleen was producing, and the amount of time that she was spending producing these monthly results that were generally the same questions being asked and answered each month. And I thought, this is automatable. We can write some code that will take all of these reviews, tag them with the same tags that Colleen had come up with that seemed most relevant, and produce these quick, easy questions each month so that Colleen had more time to dig into the more nuanced stuff later on, which was great. And the reports worked. They exist. Scaling it up and looking at more data also meant that we could start looking at topical intersections. So if each review is tagged with each relevant topic based on keywords that are found inside them, you can start looking at the overlap of those topics. So if two topics appear quite often in these reviews, they come up with a kind of darker intensity on this chart. So you can see that the toilets are quite strongly correlated with facilities and smell, unsurprising. But yeah, much more stuff in here. Tons and tons of insights, like every square on there is interesting. I was kind of frustrated by the nuance that those topics gave us, though. We've already had a discussion today about the idea of people inside museums having a different perception of themselves and their collections and all of that to external visitors. That's a key problem that we're dealing with here. And I thought that maybe the topics that we had come up with, this list, was not perfect, that we might have our audience talking about different things to what we expected them to be talking about. So I went off in search of those. First thing that I did was used a technique called Tyvek, which is really, really interesting. It produces a mathematical or a numerical representation of each word that appears in this massive corpus of text. And using that numerical representation, you can figure out the kind of distance between words, their similarity, their semantic context, if you will. So this is what that looks like. These are all of the words that exist in the TripAdvisor dataset, kind of clustered according to other similar ones. We can zoom in on those. Resolution is not fantastic, but you can see over there on the right, there are a load of numbers. Numbers get used like numbers, so they all kind of clump together in the same way. Dates, times are also here on the left. They also kind of clump together as the same kind of words. Exhibitions and objects also clump together. You can see lots of different country names related to the objects that come from those countries, and then as you move further right, you get more into individual objects, hieroglyphics, mosaics, temples, etc. Super, super interesting. I have spent many, many hours just staring at this crazy, crazy graph, trying to find interesting stuff within it. Transport and food, we can find stuff about how people are coming to the museum. Over here you've got underground, Uber, bus, street, square, and up at the top you've got cake, cream, tea, cup, expensive. These things kind of... This is exactly what I'm coming on to. So, if you can come up with a mathematical or numerical representation of words, sentences and reviews are just combinations of words. Why not come up with a numerical representation of a sentence, a review, whatever, and enumerate their similarity? You can do that using Tyvek. You can use another technique called TF-IDF. Essentially the same result. It looks like this. All these individual dots are reviews. I think there's about 20,000 of them, and they have been coloured based on their grouping, their similarity. I've tried to draw lines around similar things in an algorithmic way. I could do it manually, but this is a kind of faster, more algorithmic, reliable approach. And you can zoom in on each of these clusters, see what's going on inside them, see what the most important words are. Important is a kind of weird concept, but these are the results. The first cluster gives you words like kid, love, family, year, school. Seems to be reviews about family visits. This next one seems to be about audio guides and tours. Then reviews that mention individual objects in the collection. Reviews that mention different collections as a whole. The BM has a lot, and people either talk about the individual objects or the collections as a whole. And then another cluster where people are talking about crowding, busy, turning up early. All very, very interesting, and a much more, like I originally said, nuanced vision of what our audience is saying, how they're talking about us, and what is important to them. As Coline mentioned as well, we can do a bit of sentiment analysis and scoring. The data looks like this. We have languages, the actual language that they write down about us, and the number of stars. And we have some kind of semantic understanding of the words that they're using now. So we can use that. We can figure out which words are associated with good and bad reviews. A little side note, we can also look at the average satisfaction through time. Kind of interesting that there's a dip in the summer. It's not a huge dip, but it's worth exploring. Is it driven by demographics or visitor interests? Exhibition programming, who knows? Definitely questions worth investigating. But back to the original point, we can take arbitrary reviews now, use our semantic understanding, and apply a kind of score to them. Use a bit of machine learning to figure out what the expected star rating for that text would be with relation to our museum. That's kind of fine and good and interesting at surface level, but all of the TripAdvisor reviews that we have already have stars associated with them. It becomes interesting when you can take that understanding of how visitors are talking about your museum and apply it to new platforms like Facebook, Twitter, email, YouTube. Another super interesting thing about these techniques is that they're kind of language agnostic. The language that people are talking about you in doesn't really matter because it's a numerical representation of these things. It's all just maths. So I can apply all of the same stuff that I have applied to English reviews here to reviews in Spanish, in Chinese, all of these languages. I don't speak those languages, but if I get a person to work with me who does, then there's interesting stuff to be found. And the kind of Chinese equivalents of TripAdvisor are definitely spaces worth exploring. I should just have this note in here about how I did this. All free open source techniques, nothing paid for. Mostly locally computed on my laptop, like no fancy big cloud computing stuff. And you can see examples of similar stuff on my GitHub. I would love to open source the stuff that we have produced ourselves. If that happens, I'm not sure yet. I haven't really asked officially, but yeah, similar stuff on my GitHub if you want to kind of pinch some techniques. Allies, we...
Sorry, didn't tell you I added that one in, but...
I don't mind. Am I talking about this? Are you talking about this?
Do you want to talk about this?
Yeah. So this is not a major part of my job, and also definitely not in the original job description for Coline. It's something that we have kind of treated as a side project, but we think it's really valuable, we think it's really interesting. We want to keep it going, so we have hooked ourselves up with the Alan Turing Institute and got 2 PhD students to work with us this coming summer on this data set, trying to figure out deeper insights to take what we've started and run with it. That's valuable for us, obviously, because we get insights from it. It's valuable for them because it's great data with a real set of questions to answer. So thanks, Alan Turing Institute, for giving us those 2 PhD students for free. Thank you also to TripAdvisor for giving us this data, because it's amazing, super, super fun to work with. And yeah, kind of special. I don't think that this has really been done in museums before. That's it from me.
So, yeah, I think what partly allowed us to do this research is that when you say British Museum, some doors open up more easily than if you said that you work for HSBC. So I might not have great skills, but I am very persistent, and this is how we got the TripAdvisor data. So we went and talked to them, and we begged them, and we told them, this is what we could do with your research. We know how to scrape it. Well, Harrison knows how to scrape it, but we would rather not. And then they said, all right, we'd rather you not do that, and gave us the data. So this is about what we did, but we don't know how long this project is going to go on for. And what we're really hoping for is that other museums do similar experiments, and other museums also hound TripAdvisor or whatever platform it is that you want to have and look at to do similar things. Because we really do believe that visitor insights coupled with big data, coupled with visitor research and user experience can, A, reciprocate visitor engagement. And it can really, when you receive a message and when someone complains about it, then you can really say, we've heard you, we're really sorry, or thank you for that message, and we are going to try and change things with what you have done. We also believe it definitely helps you understand your audience and uncover new insights that you hadn't seen before, and it allows you to approach your audience in a maybe more open way than just the user testing that we all do and the kind of business cases that we try to build. And finally, we do believe that it can begin to drive change across organizations. So as I've said, the British Museum hasn't changed overnight. We haven't fixed all the problems. We haven't fixed many problems, but it's starting and things are starting and mentalities are starting. And we do hope that in the longer term, it can inform decisions either at our museums or at other museums. And that's it. Thank you very much.
Any questions?
Yep.
Have you guys started to take this data? I think you kind of mentioned about comparing it to other things, especially the one about overall satisfaction based on month. Have you started to look at comparing it to visitor kind of number data? Because that to me would maybe during school holidays people hate it more because there's more people or something like that.
Yeah. So we definitely think that the dip in the summer in satisfaction is linked. So as Harrison pointed out, it's actually a very small dip. I've made the graph look really big because I thought it was interesting, but it's actually not that big. It's probably due to visitor numbers, also overheating. We know overheating has a big impact on visitor satisfaction. Summer would be when it overheats. Anything else?
Yeah, I think that's a reasonable answer. But yeah, that kind of approach to linking this data source to all of the other ones that we have access to is what I've been doing for my entire time at the BM.
Have you found anything else really interesting from it yet?
Yeah, loads of stuff. What else have we found?
You mean in the TripAdvisor data or generally?
Comparing the TripAdvisor data to the other data that you had been collecting previously.
Do you mean specifically with relation to the time series-ness
Not
of it?
Not necessarily, but just kind of if they've overlapped in any interesting ways, if you've noticed any trends.
Exhibitions are really interesting. So seeing the way that language changes around exhibitions, I'm going to bring the slide back up just very quickly. Is this going to work? Yeah. Zoom through. So in here, in this big mad mess of words, the titles of our exhibitions do come up in the same kind of space. So people talk about our exhibitions in the same way, but watching the way that satisfaction levels differ between those exhibitions is really interesting. I don't know whether that is...
We've also been able to compare the topics that people mention here with the topics that we've been receiving in more direct messages, and that they were really quite different. So one of the main drivers of satisfaction on TripAdvisor is the fact that we're free, and people also mention the Rosetta Stone in our collections, which they don't do. When people reach out proactively to us to give positive feedback, it's mainly centered on tours or staff. And same with negative feedback. This has been... Lots of people here complain about overcrowding, which is not something that we see in direct messages except for exhibitions. So I think TripAdvisor gives us a broader view because we have more international people actually writing reviews. Whereas if you want to write to a museum, especially the British Museum, it is a bit intimidating. You have to speak English. You have to be willing to either find the email or go up to the information desk. I know my grandparents who are French who don't speak English. They want to complain that actually not going to do it because it's too difficult for them. But we do have a major overrepresentation of our local English visitors and especially members in the complaints we were receiving before looking at TripAdvisor.
How open is TripAdvisor with this data?
TripAdvisor are not incredibly forthcoming with their data. They keep it quite tightly held within their organisation. It's all public, obviously, but legally they are the owners of those reviews. It was Colleen's work trying to open that access up that really facilitated this project. It was a lot of work there, and kind of exceptional as far as we know. But hopefully the fact that we've done this is going to lead the way for more.
Yeah, because part of the contract that we have with them is that we have to speak about what we've done publicly, and at one point write about it. So we're thinking if they're willing to do that, then surely, they might give the data to other people. I know they usually sell it to a few hotels, and I think it's a bit expensive. Yeah.
The probably not going to tell you what kind of magic they do themselves with the data.
No.
No, they're not.
But we've definitely got enough from this ourselves that we're completely occupied.
This is brilliant, thank you. I was wondering whether you had a chance to implement changes on the ground to see how the trends change, or like how the reviews change, and kind of observe that over time.
We haven't seen change in the TripAdvisor reviews themselves, but we have seen some changes in direct messages. So, for instance, it's really tiny things, but we recently changed our luggage policy, and we were getting lots of complaints of people being turned at the door because they couldn't come in with their luggage, and we thought, okay, it's probably not these people's fault, and if they complain, it's also maybe because they can't find the information. That we just changed the place that we advertise that information on our website. Instead of putting it on like visiting info, whatever, we just put it on the homepage, and complaints dropped. There's some ongoing works in the toilet, so I wish I could say it was only us. It wasn't. We're also working quite closely with the access team, because we are able to also carry visitors' thoughts and complaints and show them that seating is a big issue in exhibitions. So we have we're trying to gradually increase the number of seats that we provide, also adjust light levels, and a big thing for us that Visitor Insights direct messages have changed at the museum is the question of changing places toilets, which we don't have at the moment, but which is a really big issue. And I think everyone at the museum knew it was an issue, but now that there are people whose job it is to look at Visitor Insights and to actually make sure that each one of these messages get read, and each one of these parents who come, or like carers who come and who can't, who is limited in their experience of the museum, each time these reviews can be read, I think it has had an impact on the will to actually change things in the museum.
We'll talk some more later, but let's thank Harrison.